joining us this afternoon. My name is Donna Rachelson. I am very privileged to be the strategic lead for Grow Marketing. A little bit about Grow. They are the most incredible organization. They are experienced business coaches who work with leaders, business owners, and teams to help them grow and scale their businesses. And importantly, what really makes them unique and different is that they work with leadership teams to build capability, as well as to work with them to develop solid execution plans. Together, these incredible coaches have over 120 years of business experience amongst them all. They have coached hundreds of businesses and have been very effective in helping them to scale. And, in working with these business coaches, we thought, wouldn't it be such an incredible opportunity to actually harness some of the amazing insights that they have had in working with very diverse customers, and to start to unpack some of those lessons to share amongst businesses in South Africa. And hence this concept of Grow Conversations was born. And really the objective of Grow Conversations is to really just have some conversations. What we do know is there's a lot out there about startups, there's a lot about growing businesses, but what we do know is that scaling businesses is incredibly difficult. And what leaders need to adhere to is some, really timeless centered principles that they adhere to, that they can actually use actively to scale the business. And this sounds simple, but it's actually not simple. In fact, it's far from simple, as you're going to hear from our panelists. So this is the first of a series of conversations. We're going to be hosting these monthly, and we'll give you some insight into some of the exciting topics that we're going to cover in the months to come. But I guarantee you, you are not going to want to miss any of these. They are kind of top class and really kind of deep and meaningful conversations. So the way we're going to structure the conversation is we're going to get a bit of insight from the coaches. And what I've requested of the coaches is that we make it conversational. So we may kind of kick off with Graham, and then James and Andrew will kind of pitch in based on their experiences. And then we are going to stop for some Q&A, and then we'll kind of round up the webinar. So I urge you, please, in the Q&A to post any questions that you would want to post to our very esteemed and experienced panel of coaches. And I'd like to kick off by just telling you a little bit about them. You would have seen their in-depth profiles on the invite, but I'd like to introduce you to Graham. Graham is the founder of Grow. He has incredible experience across a number of businesses, helping them to scale. And together with his particular expertise in corporate finance and accounting, he's able to really take organizations through the whole journey of scaling up, able to look at very different lenses. We also have on the call James. James has 20 years consulting experience across Africa. He also has incredible experience with businesses, and his particular area of expertise and kind of he really shines in this space is in the context of execution, which we all know it's all very well having this fantastic strategy, but if you're not able to execute it effectively, that's really where the rubber hits the road. And last but not least is Andrew. Andrew really has incredible corporate experience. He was an executive lead at Internet Solutions. He's also started a business, grown it, scaled it, and sold it, and brings a whole lot of expertise specifically in the tech space, around building and scaling businesses. So I guarantee you we are in the best possible hands that we can possibly be this afternoon. So I would like to kick off with you, Graham. And the question I'd like to ask you is, kind of given your experience of scaling businesses, or you may be in the process of scaling some customers at the moment, what have kind of been your key learnings that have come out of the process?
So thank you, Donna, for the introductions, and welcome everyone to the call. And it's hopefully going to be a good series going over the next few months. So I'm sure you're going to learn a lot today, and please feel free to ask us questions that will make the learning so much better. But just to start with and perhaps set the context for our discussion today, we're looking very much at the scaling up of businesses. So I thought I'd just quickly take you through the sort of typical life cycle of a business, just to set the scene for the scaling up of a business. And so a business starts as a startup, which is a good place to start. And the aim of a startup is to prove that they can attract customers for their product or service. And if they're able to do that, they move from being a startup to what we call a stage called survival. And at the survival stage, the business has got customers, they're operational, but it's characterized by a very high dependency on the founder. They tend to have to do everything still, and usually very limited resources, so both time and money. So the business, may be breaking even, but probably not making a lot of profit, and unlikely to be paying the founder a market-related salary. And if the founder is able to navigate that stage, that he or she is able to bring the business into what we call the success phase. And the success stage of a business is a really nice place for a business to be. By now it's, making decent profits. There's a team supporting the founder. The business is still usually quite dependent on the founder for making key decisions and direction. But all the work doesn't sit with them anymore. And so we have a profitable business. And so when we look at our clients, these businesses can do between, say, 5 and 10, 15 million rand a year profit. So they're very nice businesses. And then there's a critical decision that has to be made, which is, do you want to scale the business? Do you want to grow it rapidly and, grow it from, 30, 40, 50 employees to 150 plus and a much larger business? And that's a critical decision. For some founders, they don't want that kind of stress and pressure that comes with growing a massive business and the risks that come with it. And so this is the sort of inflection point. Either you continue with your business as is and enjoy hopefully good returns out of it, or you scale it. And that's the sort of point we want to discuss today, is what does it take to scale your business? And so that sort of just sets the scene for where we are. And the first thing, Donna, I wanted to share around what's needed to scale a business is just to talk a little bit about strategy. And so typically when a business gets to the success stage, what's required to get it there is quite different from scaling it. So for a lot of businesses in the success stage, the founder started out, had a product or service or an idea, and through, his or her efforts, they've been able to, deliver the product, attract customers in a reasonable number to build a successful business. The difference now is in scaling up is you've got to attract a large number of customers at scale. And so the process of attracting them in the first stage isn't usually the stage or the way you're going to do it to really grow the business. And so from a strategy point of view, you've got to revisit how will you grow the business. And there are a lot of different ways you can do it. So it's not a one size fit all, but you've got to recognize that what got your business to the success stage is not necessarily going to allow it to grow further unless, you're comfortable with just consistent incremental growth. And so some of the areas strategically, we've seen clients be successful in getting scale in their business is to launch new products. So often the product that the business was started on is a good product, but you've learned a lot more about your customers. You have a lot more skills, capabilities, resources. And often the product that scales the business isn't the one that you necessarily started out with. And so there's a possibility to, develop new products, partnering with a bigger company. So one of our clients sold 25% of their business to Standard Bank, and that gave them access to Standard Bank's distribution network they have a financial services product. And that was the catalyst that allowed them to scale. Even selling your business might be the answer to scaling it. Obviously, it's critical that you have a good earn-out structure that allows you to benefit from the growth in the business. But one of our clients sold his business, and during the earn-out, it doubled in size because of the benefit of being in a big group. And, it allowed him to achieve a significant, financial return on his sale. Other things, making an acquisition, not often considered by smaller businesses, but often that is the catalyst that might be needed to allow a business to scale. Finding something unique and valuable in your business. It can be an alternative strategy. Certainly Sorbet we worked with, they did that incredibly well around their culture and service. And then the final one I've seen is it's a travel business we worked with, and what they had to get right to scale their business was their marketing engine. So their product was great, but in a travel related business, you've got to tell a lot of people around the world that you've got some great destinations to come to. And so they worked probably for about 3 years just getting their marketing and sales engine working. And then once they got it working, they nearly doubled the business within a year. And so, there are different ways, but it's likely you're going to have to do something different to get that right.
Okay, so let's zone in a little bit more on the strategy, Graham, because, how was it that these businesses determined what were those key aspects that would actually be the trigger to scale?
They took time to think through it. So often in business, we don't take enough time, but they were very intent on their desire to scale their business, and then spent a lot of time really understanding their customers, their marketplace, and looked for ways to scale the business. And sometimes you need a little bit of luck. But if you're looking and you're thinking strategically and investing the time to do it, all of these companies have identified ways that they could scale their business.
Okay, great. And if I could maybe link with Andrew or James, any kind of comments on the strategy side?
Yeah, so definitely love to jump in there, Donna. The idea of taking time to think about your strategy, I think is so important. So I think, the things that I've seen work for businesses that are scaling is, first of all, to organize your strategic thinking into a framework. So very frequently, the thoughts are there, but they're not clearly organized. It's not easy to communicate the strategic thinking very frequently between, founding partners. So the one founding partner's got one line of thinking, the other founding partner's got another line of thinking. They're talking to each other, but they're not necessarily, talking directly. They're often missing each other in terms of some of the strategic thinking. So, really getting a robust framework that you can use to organize your thoughts. And it must be a simple framework. All of the strategic thinking should be able to be mapped out onto a single page. If you can do that, then, you've really started to get clarity around your strategic thinking. And then, I think the other thing that is so important is, to building on what Graham is saying, taking time. So what I've seen play out to the businesses that I work with is, you need to keep revisiting your strategic thinking. It doesn't work to go away for a Bosbarat and do a day and you do all of your thinking and then think you've come up with a perfect strategy, and you've nailed it, and then you go back to the office the next day and you hope that you can execute on that strategy. What I've seen work is that when teams frequently come back to the strategic thinking, typically at least every quarter, and almost scrape away the next layer of understanding and insights, and looking for the nuggets of gold that they can uncover by just talking about their strategy, revisiting it again. That's the thing that works. So it's quarter after quarter after quarter, they keep revisiting their strategy. And what I see happen is that teams that do that build what I like to call strategic thinking muscle. And I like to sort of explain it like, you can't go to the gym once, you walk into the gym, pump a few weights, and come out buff. It just doesn't work that way. You got to keep going back to the gym, keep repeating it over and over again in order for the muscles to build. And it's the same with developing strategy in your organization. Each time you revisit it, relook at it, challenge yourself, be challenged by your team members, challenge your team members. That's the thing that builds the strategic thinking muscle. And over time, I've seen teams go from complete lack of clarity around how they want to take their business and take it forward, to having unbelievable strategies that are, in many cases, completely market disrupting, and very defensible if they're successful on executing on that strategy. So compelling that they're able to put it in front of investors to raise capital to potentially support the growth of that strategy. And because it's all organized into a simple framework, it's easy to communicate to any stakeholders that are relevant, both potential investors, business partners, management team, the entire organization, and that's pretty powerful.
Awesome. So I think there's some awesome nuggets coming out there. The importance of taking time to think strategically, to ensuring that the team builds strategic thinking kind of muscle. So it becomes part of the way that they conduct business. And I'm sensing there's quite a few issues around the alignment of the team, because often, even if it's two owners in a business, may have kind of different perceptions in their minds of what constitutes a scaling strategy. Let's maybe move to you, James. What have been some of your experiences in scaling businesses?
Yes, I think just building on what Andrew's talking about is taking this time to get the team together on a quarterly to do the thinking is, the thinking is actually the easy part. The execution is the hard part. The doing is the hard part. And so, one of the principles which have been and is really effective, and where the kind of rubber hits the road is around execution, and specifically meeting rhythms in this context, which is about creating the time and space for the team to get together. Andrew referenced the quarterly meeting, which is one type of meeting. There are a number of different meeting rhythms that you can have in a business, from an annual cycle to a quarterly, to a monthly, to a weekly, and to a daily. And all of those have slightly different objectives and different agendas. But as a business gets bigger, it becomes more and more people. And the biggest challenge that people have when they work together is communication. And meeting rhythms are really there to solve that particular issue. I think that probably the best example for me was a business we started working with in 2015. And at that stage was doing about 100 million in turnover. They're in the education space, and they've grown exponentially. I think this year they'll do about 350 million turnover at profit or EBITDA numbers that are unheard of in the industry. And I was having a conversation with him, the CEO, a short while ago, and I said to him, what's been the key to your success? And you've shared principally three things, or three different types of meetings. And the first was the quarterly rhythm, which Andrew articulated or spoke to, and creating a rhythm where his and his team are thinking about their business, creating the time and space. Out of that comes out a very clear plan of what they need to do, and then they're holding each other accountable to get it done. So that was the one. The second was the daily huddle, which is the short daily meeting, which helps the organization pulse and figure out what it needs to do just in that particular day. And as you can appreciate, the faster a business wants to move, the faster it needs to pulse. And that daily huddle, that short, sharp meeting every morning with your team to check in as to who's doing what and what needs to get done, not only allows him to remain connected to his team and what they do, but also lets everybody in the room know what's happening and where people are stuck. So progress towards activities and their plan is significantly enhanced. And they do it diligently. On the days that I go there to facilitate their sessions, I always arrive an hour earlier, and their daily huddle's at 8:30, and I'm part of the huddle. We start our session at 9 o'clock. And there's 15, sometimes 20 people in the executive boardroom, and the CEO goes around, and it's just part of their culture now. So that was the second. And then the third was what he calls his one-on-ones, which are an opportunity for him on a weekly basis to connect with his key staff members and figure out and ask them what their plan is and get really close to what they want to do and achieve that week. And then he lets them go and execute it, and empowers them and gives them trusts them to go and do it. And it frees them up to think about the growth of the business and strategy and all these other things which are much more on the business focused. So it's, those are just three examples from one particular client which have made a material difference to that business. But I think the key discipline there is his commitment and buy-in to that. And what we see a lot of times is people dabble and try and they don't stick to it. So that's a really important part. I think off the back of that, it's also not only about having the meeting, it's about making sure that the meetings are of high quality. And that just requires the application of when we think about them, some very simple principles like having an agenda, making sure the right people are in the room, having a circular of actions, making sure there's clarity of who needs to do what by when at the end of the meeting. But I'm always amazed at how poor and slack teams and people become at that. It just becomes something which falls by the wayside. And so you often end up in a meeting where everybody sits down the next week and they start saying, okay, well, what are we supposed to do? Who was going to do that, or who was going to do that? So, having some discipline and structure around those can really enhance them in whatever format that takes, whether it's the weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annual meeting. So I think those are really important. Make sure that they're in the diary, planned, have the discipline around them, and then apply some good principles around building structure and making those meetings really powerful.
Awesome. Graham, if I can maybe circle back to you, we've often heard this, a key problem that business owners have is that they tend to work too much in their business and not enough on their business. In the context of scaling up, what are some of kind of the key principles and aspects that you work with leaders in the context of that? Mute.
The big challenge.
The famous mute.
Yes. The big challenge with that is, often the team beneath the founder is not strong enough. And as a result, that pushes a lot of, the effort back onto, either the senior management team or the founder. And so, the focus of building the team has to be, it's probably the hardest part of scaling the business, is the team aspect of it. And so it requires quite a lot of attention. And, a few sort of observations or people that we've seen do it really well is that, they're very focused on finding good people. And they understand it. Everyone knows you're meant to find good people, but it doesn't necessarily result in a focus. And so, what I've seen work really well is, a CEO that I worked with, he ran a family business. He wasn't family, he was appointed as the CEO in Angola. And it was a $1 billion turnover business in Angola. And, he sort of took me through his process of finding talent. If anyone's been to Luanda in Angola, you will know that it's not a destination that people are looking to go and live and work. And he worked tirelessly all the time, connecting into expat markets, expat groups on LinkedIn, building relationships, because obviously if people were already expats living in, some of these, more developing countries, they may be open to an adventure in Angola. And the management team that I worked with, they're running this extremely big business in a very challenging environment, were incredibly talented. And so you've got to be continually looking for talent all the time, talking to people, so that when your business is scaling, you know where to turn. And certainly, clients that we've worked with that have scaled the business, if you look at the key members they brought on their team, in most cases, they knew them before, from, various other roles or guises. And so I think that's key. And then the second one is a little bit about your marketing. The challenge you have as a scale-up business is, talent is scarce, and great talent can go and work for big companies that have great careers and big brands. And so attracting those people to come and work for your business is not that easy. It's scarce and not easy to attract them. And I think, what Ian Furr did at Solvay very well was marketing the company as a great place to work. And so, he got on the speaker circuit and, talked about the culture and his beliefs of business. He wrote a book. And so there was a lot of marketing around it being a great place to work with a great purpose. And he was able to attract some very, very senior people with great talent out of big corporates that just wanted to come and work there because of what they were doing. And so, your purpose and marketing that is a way to attract talent when you're not necessarily known.
Okay, some fabulous points there, especially around kind of getting the right people on the bus and ensuring that you have the very best resources that are going to be part of your team as you do scale your business. Circling back to you, Andrew, any other kind of insights that you'd like to put in the discussion?
Yeah, so I think, Donna, building on what Graham's saying around, once you've attracted this talent into the organization, how do you then make sure that you forge that team into a cohesive leadership team? And I think that's a thing that requires a lot of energy and investment. So frequently you bring these wonderful people, highly experienced, energetic, intelligent, great ideas. The challenge that they have is, how do they not operate in silos? How do they start to see themselves as a team, as opposed to they've been brought in to run their specific department and they want to get their department to be healthy, and rather thinking about, how do I make sure that I'm part of a very functional team, and together all of our various departments that we lead are working cohesively to drive the business forward. And there's a bit of push and pull here, because very frequently you want to get the right people into your team, but if you haven't got a clear strategy, you find that you're getting the wrong people into the business and you can't give them clear direction as to what you need them to get done. I found it's very helpful that once teams have started to get clarity around their strategic thinking, that they then hire in the right people for the roles. They first define the roles without looking at the personalities of the people in the business. Say, what is the roles that we need in this business in order to execute on the strategy that we've defined? It can be very tough, because you've got some people in your business who probably, wanting to get hold of some of these roles, and some people feeling threatened. So it's a difficult but important exercise to divorce the personalities of the people in your business, understand what are the correct roles that we need to have in order to drive this business forward, what are the expectations of those roles, and write it all down. So get it all mapped out and get it written down, and then go through a process of mapping your existing people into those new roles and working out what's the new talent that you need to hire in to fill any of the missing gaps. It's a difficult process and needs to be rigorously done using the kinds of techniques that Graham was talking about, tapping into networks, or I'm a huge fan of top grading as a great methodology for identifying great talent. If you don't know them, use the top grading methodology to really get insights into their competencies as to whether they can be successful in the role. so then once you've got all the right people into this team, then now the exercise of forging this team into a cohesive leadership team starts. And what are you doing to make sure that that team is really building the right relationships, that they can start to trust each other, so that they are collaborating, they're productive, they're cohesive, and they're helping to drive the business forward without necessarily the CEO or the founder providing all the guidance and direction. So quite a lot going on there just around getting that management team or that senior team really working for the business.
Wonderful. And you've made reference to I think one of the best books I've ever read. So for those of you on the call who have difficulty recruiting the right staff into your business, please buy Top Grading off Amazon. It is a fabulous book and really gives you great insights into the recruitment process. I'm going to loop to James for any final thoughts on this discussion that we've been having now. I urge you all to post any questions in the Q&A. I'm going to move to ask a few questions after James gives his final thoughts, and we'd love to kind of hear some of your questions. So James, any kind of other thoughts based on scaling?
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, I mean, as Jim Collins said in his books, get the right people on the bus, which is a big component of what Andrew was talking about. I think for me, in some of my experience, a really important characteristic of who gets on the bus is that individual's growth, what I would call their growth mindset, or their appetite to learn and develop and grow. And so, as a business grows, the individual needs to grow with it. When a business scales, that principally talks to rapid growth. And if the individual doesn't grow as fast as the business, he or she is going to, end up moving backwards and be left behind. So an individual's appetite, attitude, or energy, or intent to learn and to grow is massively important. And that can happen in, a multitude of different ways. I mean, the simplest way is just to read. But today there's podcasts, online stuff, paid stuff, free stuff, courses like Udemy that are just a couple of $100. So there really are so many options. And I think, that principle is as important in fact, more important for the staff, a bigger part for the leader than it is the staff. We've actually seen a few instances where the business has outgrown the leader and he or she is no longer capable or the right person to lead the business, which is a travesty because it often doesn't need to be that way. And reading is just this, really the simplest and easiest way to do that. And I often ask the question in some of my earlier workshops with my clients, a bit of a joke for me now, but I ask who reads books, or who reads business books, and I see one or two hands pop up, and then if no hands, I've had one instance where no hands popped up, and I said, who reads any book? And I saw no hands pop up, and that just gave me a little bit of insight as to the attitude and energy that the team had for reading. So it's really important that that individuals, or when you're looking to bring these people into the business, they have a history or they have an attitude towards wanting to learn and grow, and that they're investing time and to do that. And companies can build it into their culture. I mean, it's very easy to operationalize learning in a business. Again, I'll refer back to this same business I was talking about a little bit earlier. They have a monthly book review where somebody in the leadership group has to read a book and he or she does a presentation back on the book and they have a conversation about it. So there are ways to tactically bring this learning philosophy, this learning mindset into a business. And I think it's really critical that leaders of scaling businesses are looking to do that, or they stand a high probability of being left behind.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to shift to some questions. We've got some nice questions coming in, so please keep posting them, everybody. Andrew, I'm going to pose this to you because I know the person asking the question and they're a tech-based company, so I think you'll be really well positioned to answer this. And the question is, how would you define a successful startup? Duration of life, level of revenue, team size, profits, or other. So I'm going to let you think about that. And then I'm going to pose this question to Graham, if you could give it some thought. When do you start with corporate governance to ensure that the business is ready to scale? And how do you influence the owner or founder to pivot? And then I'm going to pose this question to James. The panelists have spoken a lot about the right team dynamics, culture, accountability. From your experiences, how then would you reward those team members that are on the bus? How do you get beyond the salary, cost to company, bonus, etc., and move towards sharing in profitability equity, especially in family and closely held businesses? So hopefully I've given you a bit of time to formulate your answers. Andrew, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, thanks, Donna. So I think the concept of startup is quite confusing. You read about the startup ecosystem in, for example, the United States, and the whole venture capital ecosystem, and they talk about startups, and these are like multi-billion-dollar businesses, and they're still considered to be startups because they're VC funded. And so, I think it's important to understand that the startup ecosystem in South Africa is very different to the startup ecosystem in the United States. So, so geographically, I'll assume, and Antoine, that your questions around a South African startup and what is the definition of success for a South African startup. I think I would go back to Graham's opening statements around how do you classify the various stages of growth of a business. For me, once a business moves itself past that sort of survival stage where it's uncertain simply because of the revenues and the profitability of the business as to whether the business can survive if it sustains a substantial knock. So like a substantial knock might be the loss of a big customer, or it might be the entrance of a big new competitor, or a new technology coming in that really knocks this business off its post. So a successful business for us is really one that's generating healthy profits, several million rands worth of profits, 3, 4, 5 million rands worth of profits, up to 15 million rands profits per annum. And it's able to use that profitability to fund its continued growth. That is, then you've got a successful business. Your business has entered that success stage. And then it comes back to that key question that Graham was alluding to, which is, what is your choice now? Are you going to have a lifestyle business and you're going to enjoy the profitability of this business and be less invested in your business, you're sort of taking lots of holidays and things, and you're taking profits out of the business? Or are you really going to look to accelerate the growth of the business? In that case, you've got to be fully invested in the business. A lot of the profitability that the businesses generate has got to be reinvested into the business in order to create that growth. So success for us is that capability to create profit. And I suppose, to bring it back to the startup question specifically, it's the key word there's the capability to create profit. So either it is already creating profits, or it's already chosen to reinvest a lot of the profits and that's being sunk back into the business. So it doesn't look like the business is that particularly profitable. But with a few small adjustments, it's able to switch on the profitability of the business. That would be a successful startup for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm going to come to you, Graham, but I'm going to add something to your question, because part of your question was, how do you influence the owner or founder to pivot? And Tabani has added to his question saying, founders might not be the best suitable candidates to drive the business forward. How do you change their mindset?
So I think my first response there is not certain it's about sort of influencing or changing their mindset to pivot. I think, to pivot to scale the business. I think it's about exploring what they really want, because scaling a business requires certain things that some founders are not prepared to do. And if they're not, it's not a journey you should take them on. And some of the things that they're going to have to do is take all of that nice profit and cash flow and invest it in growth and possibly take a lot of risk, which for some of them at that stage they don't want to do. It might be bringing in investors into the business, and some of them are not particularly good at cooperating with other shareholders. And it changes the whole management of the business from the founder being, I guess, the star of the show and making everything happen, to his role changing to building a management team and leading them to make it work. And so for some founders, that is either a change that are willing to make or not able to make. And that's fine. I think recognizing that is important, because not all businesses need to scale. You can still run a very successful business at the success stage that makes good profits, has very happy employees, operates in a very niche market. And we've got many clients like that. And so scaling doesn't have to be the outcome for the business. Obviously, how you manage a business that wants to stay at more of the success stage is different in terms of the kind of employee who would want to work there. Some employees want to work for a fast-growing, scaling businesses, others don't. So you'll have a different kind of approach to who you hire. And so yes, I think it's more a case of finding out what's best for the founder. Secondly, some businesses are not easily to scale, and you may not want to scale them, particularly if they're operated in fragmented industries. Scaling those kind of businesses is extremely difficult and risky. So that would be my thought on influencing. However, what is the second part of the question, which is very good, is there are founders that would like to scale their business and are able to recognize they're not the right people to do that. And that is a great opportunity to achieve both outcomes, where the founder doesn't have to take that pressure and can, get someone else to do the scaling. And that can often be quite a nice option for the founder, but still a difficult one for them to get their minds around. But I think in conclusion, scaling up is generally, linked to a type of entrepreneur who has that drive and desire to build a scaled business.
Awesome. James, I'm going to... Sorry. Yeah, please do.
Sorry, just a thought for Thabani is, there's a wonderful book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The author is Patrick Lencioni, and it's a story of a new CEO who comes into a business, and part of and it's written in a fiction format, so it's really nice, light, easy read, a really enjoyable read. And part of the story is how the former CEO of the business recognizes that he's no longer the person to take the business forward, and he actually makes the call to step down and take on a different role. So there's potentially some nuggets and insights for Thabani inside that fable of the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Awesome. Thank you so much. James, I'm going to come to you. If you could just give, somebody asked the question, how long is the daily huddle? And is it the same agenda? So if you wouldn't mind just answering that, and then also the question around, how you reward your team beyond the cost to company, bonuses, etc.
Sure. Now, the daily huddle is between 8 and 12 minutes. So it's a very short meeting. It's a stand-up meeting. The agenda is fixed. It's the same. The purpose is really to get an understanding of who's busy with what. There's some standard questions that are asked. And everybody goes around the room sharing answers to those questions. It's not a forum to have long debates and discussions that solve problems. It's literally just a quick whip around and check in. So that's the daily huddle. Regards to the question around rewards, I think what the person asked around, I think it was Sanjay asked around rewards was, he's articulated a number of different financial rewards. But I think there are also some non-financial rewards. So it's perhaps a good starting point to understand what does reward mean to you? What does reward mean in your context? But I think the simplest answer is very carefully. When you look at giving equity away or sharing in profitabilities, to do it very carefully. I think each circumstance is different, each family dynamic is different, each business is different. So I'd be cautious to give a broad general statement as to how to do that. I think the principle here is that typically individuals perform even better when they have skin in the game, and so there needs to be a way for the leader or the leaders or the owners of the business to lock in and tying those people into the business, and that is done through various forms of shapes of rewards. But I think it's very difficult for me to articulate anything specific or anything general, as it's quite specific to the circumstance of the business.
Okay, great. Graham, here's a fascinating question for you. I'm holding on with bated breath. How do you get clients to understand value over cost? And Andrew, there's a question for you. Getting the right person is one of our challenges. How do we get the focus passed to the management team, bearing in mind that our main challenge is that clients look at the founder when they require assistance? So Graham, if you would maybe like to kick off with the value question.
So I'm assuming it's value versus cost when it comes to buying things into the business, suppliers or materials or whatever it is. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs are very cost conscious. I mean, they have to be in starting a business. Generally where I've had a client where, their team members frustrated with, everything has to be at the lowest price. What I encourage them to do is, it's a business proposal. These debates around cost versus value tend to be driven quite emotionally, where everyone has an opinion on it, rather than factually. So, if we're buying a cheap product or a supply or material and it's costing us money, well, how much is it costing us? And, what would we gain by swapping to, a product that costs more, but is, overall a better value equation? And often when you start to look at it, there's also qualitative and then sometimes there's quantitative, because, unhappy customers, may be a little bit more difficult to measure the impact on a business. But you could certainly report on the number of unhappy customers you've got, because whatever you make breaks or doesn't work because you've done it on the cheap. That's how I like to encourage that debate, because then it's less my view versus your view, and it's a lot more around, what are the facts telling us should be the right decision for the business.
Nice, thank you. Andrew, over to your question.
Yeah, so the question is about how do we get the focus passed to the management team, and in this particular business, Aubrey, it sounds like your clients look to you as the founder when they require assistance. So I think the big thing is, again, getting into these strategic planning rhythms. So what I see play out with the teams that I work with is frequently I'll start working with the founder and his or her partner, and just start to get the founder and the partner to start thinking strategically. But quite quickly I look to try and get those two people, that one person, to bring more of their management team into the strategic planning sessions. And the key thing around the dynamic that is generated in those sessions is that they now come on the journey with the thinking about how we want to take this business forward. So it's no longer all the knowledge and all the thinking sitting inside the CEO or the founder's head. Now we start challenging the senior management team to think carefully about how we want to take this business going forward. So a great example that I've seen is, senior management team frequently coming and wanting to just knock price down. Great opportunity, new client. If we can come into this new price, we can win the deal. And it's taken, it's obviously huge frustration to try and get people to say, actually, our strategy is not to sell on price. Our strategy is to sell on value. And then when we take the management team through the strategic thinking and we start getting them to interrogate their own thoughts and challenge each other, then the penny starts to drop. So now we're getting, that senior management team buying into the strategic thinking. So that's number one. Two, as part of that process, setting the execution priorities. So we don't do that as, the CEO in a strategic planning session and then coming away from the strategic planning session and dishing out tasks to the senior management team. The priority setting process is done in a room together, and the teams arm wrestle over, is that a priority or is that a priority? And they challenge each other's thinking. And by the time you get to the end of that day, the thinking has been done, and the idea is to get the whole team to commit to going, of all the things that we could be doing in this business, these are the top 4 things that we're going to get done over the next 90 days. And then the whole team rallies around that. Now what we've got is that we've got the management team working to help the CEO and the top founding people in the business to support that execution against that strategy. So we start taking the broader management team on the journey, and we start devolving execution and strategic thinking to the senior management team instead of it sitting just inside the heads of the CEO. But I don't know if that makes sense.
Cool. I'm going to pose this question to kind of anybody on the panel who wants to ask. Is that COVID-19, we had to have that word somewhere in our discussion today, has caused many tech companies who have had existing customers to downscale or cancel their contracts. What do you feel is the best recovery strategy as a tech company? So I don't know who wants to grab that with a quick answer.
The tech guy, Andrew.
It's quite interesting. Many of the tech companies that I've been working with have been impacted by COVID, but not necessarily hard. I've seen tech companies very effectively move to work from home. They saw a big spike in productivity in the early phases of COVID, the first couple of months, but generally managing to sustain a certain level of customer loyalty. So the question is, what do you feel is the best recovery strategy as a tech company? I think it's applicable whether you're a tech company or in any other industry. You've got to be taking a very careful look at your cash flow. You've got to be very, very clear on what do you need to do, what are some of the hard decisions that you might need to take in order to be able to remove costs out of your business in order to sustain the business at the lower revenues that you're now seeing. And then simultaneously, I think probably the most powerful thing is to start working on getting this management team cohesive. So this is not necessarily going to solve the problem in the short term, but the businesses that have, spent the last 2 years forging a cohesive management team are the ones that are getting through the COVID situation the best, because the whole management team is coming together. They're already aligned. They're good at holding each other accountable. They're good at challenging each other's thinking. They got into daily rhythms with each other, talking to each other every single day about what are the new trends that they're seeing in the market, and saying, how do we react today based on what happened yesterday, or at the very least weekly? How do we react to this week based on what we saw last week? So coming back to James's meeting rhythms, those disciplines have been incredibly powerful to help businesses to react very nimbly and agilely to, that's not a word, in an agile way, to the COVID-19 challenges. That's a short answer to that question.
Fabulous. Guys, so our time has kind of just flown. The great news is that we have just touched the surface. This is the first of conversations. We are committed to holding them monthly, and we are going to deep dive into important issues around scaling your business. So what I would like to do just for a moment is, if anything in this workshop has triggered a thought for you, maybe I need some support, maybe I need some guidance, maybe I need to be thinking about my business differently, there are 2 particular offerings that you may be interested in. So as I have highlighted, Grow does offer scaling up business coaching, we're really helping you close that gap in your business. And really, it's a really robust offering. There's a business assessment that is based on a specific growth formula that Grow uses. A strategic plan is developed together with the team. There is a robust process around annual and quarterly plans. There's a strong focus on execution support. So it's not just about developing a great strategy. There are 3 different levels of coaching. You can engage once a week, twice a month, once a month, whatever kind of level you want to engage. And there are a whole lot of benefits that sit around that, a very robust learning and execution platform. There are exclusive growth seminars that Grow has, and a lot of thought leadership. There is also an amazing offering called peer advisory boards. Sorry, it's your biggest, the biggest thing when you run. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, is the peer advisory boards. And these are really an opportunity for 8 business owners that come together. And this is facilitated by a Grow coach in a really safe and confidential environment. And what we do in those peer advisory boards is we use them not only to educate you about scaling up a business, but we also put some strategic vigor into it, help you to think about your strategy, but most importantly, look at your quarterly kind of planning, which the coaches have alluded to. So if any of those 2 offerings interest you, please feel free to drop James a call, an email, james@grow.za.com. And we'll also pop an email to all of you tomorrow, just to highlight some of the details of those offerings if you would like to kind of explore them further. So I would like to just say on behalf of the Grow coaches, and myself, Donna Rachelson, a huge thank you to all of you. I'm really excited with the outcome of our first Grow conversation, and hoping that you will connect with us on our next one. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you very much, Donna, and thanks to everybody.
Great, some nice feedback. That was fabulous.